Single dad was recorded breaking company rules at 2 a.m. What the CEO discovered changed her forever. The motion sensor lights buzzed to life at 2 to 12 a.m., bathing the Halcyon Technologies server corridor in a sterile glow. Jonah Mercer didn't flinch. He stood alone in the silence of the 37th floor, one man beneath the weight of a tower built from glass steel and decisions that once shattered his life. His gloved hands moved with measured precision, tightening a cable, adjusting a relay. The walls around him hummed with data and memory. But what caught his eye wasn't the wiring. It was the screen flickering beside him. A line of code had surfaced, buried deep in the system, unchanged for 12 years. He knew it the moment he saw it. His code. A function he'd written in the earliest days of Halcyon's framework. Still running, still trusted, still unnamed in the company's architecture. Jonah hesitated. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, heart tightening. A tiny memory flickered. His wife Anna curled in a hospital bed, smiling weakly as he promised, "I'll keep building for him." She nodded, eyes full of pain and belief. He made the edit. Just one line. A bug fix. Quiet. Invisible. He logged out. But what he didn't know was that Camera 37B caught everything. Evelyn Drake stared at the security feed with cold detachment. At first, "Zoom in," she ordered. Her assistant complied, scrubbing the playback and freezing the frame. The man's face was angled slightly downward, gray at the temples, uniform standard issue for night contractors, but she knew that stance, that posture, that unnervingly quiet focus. Jonah Mercer. 12 years ago, he stood before her and warned of a flaw in Halcyon's flagship medical AI. He had no presentation, no marketing jargon, just code and consequences. She hadn't listened. Her husband, COO, then all charm and manipulation, had convinced the board Jonah was a liability. "He's paranoid, emotional. He'll destroy us with fear." The board agreed. Evelyn co-signed the termination. Now the same man once branded a saboteur was back, fixing things again, quietly, unpaid, uncredited, a ghost in the system. "Who cleared his contract?" she asked. "Facilities signed him last year," her assistant replied. "He's listed as on-call electrician. External. No red flags." Evelyn didn't speak. Her eyes were locked on the footage. Jonah's hand brushed the monitor with a precision she hadn't seen since the prototype meeting 12 years ago, when he stood at the center of a whiteboard and restructured a failing algorithm in 20 minutes flat. Even then, he'd held the marker like this. Thumb high, wrist loose, deliberate, exact. Her chest tightened. She looked down at the contractor log. Jonah Mercer, shift 10:00 p.m. to 4:00 a.m. Active for 6 months. No one had told her, or maybe no one had thought he mattered anymore. Jonah moved through the corridor like a man walking over his own grave. The hum of data servers echoed around him as he shut the access panel. His knees ached. His hands were no longer as steady as they once were, but the fire in his chest hadn't gone out. Not since Anna. Not since Leo. Not since the betrayal. He didn't hate Evelyn Drake. He never had. But the company she now ran was built atop decisions that cost him his career, his reputation, and nearly his family. He'd stayed silent because Leo needed him, because the medical bills didn't care about pride, because sometimes the only way to protect your child is to swallow the bitterness and keep the lights on. He didn't work at Halcyon. He endured it. At night, while the building slept, he fixed what was broken. And when no one was watching, he stole minutes in old labs to teach Leo. Binary, Python, logic trees, ethics in AI. He taught Leo not just how to build, but why we build. He once told his son, "Don't write code to impress the world. Write it to protect it." The elevator doors closed behind him. Alone, he caught his reflection in the panel. Still here, he muttered, still fixing what they forgot. That morning, Evelyn stood at the upper balcony overlooking the glass atrium. Sunlight spilled over the orientation banners of Halcyon Rising, the company's high-profile scholarship for underserved students. The crowd below was all energy and hope. She scrolled through the student profiles on her tablet. One name made her freeze. Leo Mercer, age 18, full scholarship recipient, top 1% in national programming aptitude, built a local community learning app by 16, turned down a Stanford offer to remain close to his recovering father, Father Jonah Mercer. A line from his essay sat bold at the top. My father taught me how to debug a system, not just the kind that crashes, but the kind that forgets who built it. Evelyn's throat closed. Ma'am, her assistant asked behind her. Are you all right? She didn't respond. She remembered the day she approved Jonah's dismissal. She'd thought it would end there. That time would erase people like him. Quiet men who stood too straight in rooms that demanded submission. But they don't fade. They build. They raise sons who write essays like Code Exact Cutting Unforgettable. Evelyn glanced down at the crowd. There he was, Leo Mercer. Standing at the edge of the room, notebook in hand, posture relaxed, just like his father, but with fire behind the eyes. It wasn't resentment. It was clarity. Wait and see, she whispered to herself. Ma'am, her assistant, asked again. Evelyn turned. Nothing. Just keep an eye on Jonah Mercer and his son. That night in their tiny apartment on the city's edge, Jonah unlocked the door quietly. Leo was already home typing rapidly music in one earbud. You fixed the backup power node on 37, didn't you? Leo asked without looking up. Jonah smiled. You monitoring my work now? I monitor everything Leo said, especially when it concerns the building. I'll run one day. Jonah chuckled. Ambitious. Leo looked up. I saw your code. The patch and server subroutine. That was yours. It was broken, Jonah said simply. I fixed it. You know she saw the footage, right? Jonah nodded. I expect she did. You think she remembers Jonah's face darkened? Some things. People never forget. They just pretend long enough to live with them. Leo hesitated. If you'd stayed in the industry if they hadn't pushed you out, would Mom still be here? Jonah sat down quiet for a long beat. Then I don't know. But I do know she made me promise something before she closed her eyes for the last time. Leo looked at him. Jonah's voice softened. Don't let bitterness raise our boy. A silence hung between them. Then Leo reached across the table. She didn't, he said. You didn't. Outside, the city hummed. Inside, beneath one flickering light and a cracked window, a man who once built systems now raised something far more fragile and far more powerful. A son who remembered. A son who would not forget. And a legacy that quietly had just begun to rise again. Halcyon Technologies smelled of new paint and ambition that morning. Sunlight spilled across the marble lobby, but the brightness couldn't quite mask the tension humming beneath its surface. Up on the 5th floor in a sleek glass conference room labeled Innovation Lab, Leo Mercer sat quietly at the end of a polished table. Around him, the other Halcyon Rising scholars buzzed with excitement, testing tablets, unpacking sleek gift boxes, chatting about the day's coding challenge. Leo remained still, a notebook open in front of him, a pencil spinning between his fingers. Across from him, a junior developer from Halcyon's AI division stood at a whiteboard attempting to explain a glitch in the company's adaptive learning algorithm. His voice trembled just slightly, like a man pretending to be confident in a room smarter than him. The AI isn't personalizing fast enough, he said. It's recognizing inputs but not adjusting in real time for different learning speeds. We think the root's in the data pipeline delay, but Leo raised his hand, calm and unassuming. If the system uses Halcyon's legacy parser, the lag isn't in the pipeline, he said. It's in the threading protocol. The parser can't distinguish idle threads during overload, so it queues unnecessarily. The room fell silent. The junior dev blinked. I'm sorry, what Leo leaned forward. Line 742 of the old parser. It's still baked into your architecture. You're using a 12-year-old shortcut someone never replaced." The man's face flushed. And how would you know that Leo closed his notebook? Because the original line of code wasn't written by Halcyon. It was written by Jonah Mercer, my father. You could have heard a pin drop. Someone in the back whispered, "Wait." The Jonah Mercer. A girl to Leo's left leaned in wide-eyed. "Isn't that the guy who was blacklisted?" Leo finished smiling faintly. "Yeah, that guy." The developer tried to regain control. "Regardless, this isn't personal. This is company infrastructure." Leo nodded. "Exactly. That's why I fixed it." A dozen eyes snapped to him. What Leo reached into his bag pulled out a beat-up laptop wrapped in electrical tape and stickers that said things like, "Truth compiles and build loudly, live quietly." He tapped a few keys and spun the screen toward the room. "There's a sandbox instance of your system on here. Last night I mirrored the environment and rewrote the threading protocol. My fix reduced lag by 41%. Try it." The developer hesitated, then took the laptop. As he scrolled, his mouth fell open slightly. The room started murmuring. Someone asked, "You did this?" Last night, Leo shrugged. Was curious. Another voice, "What IDE do you even use?" Leo smiled. "Whatever runs on a 10-year-old processor." That broke the tension. The room chuckled, but the junior developer's hands shook slightly as he set the laptop down. He knew what everyone else now suspected. This wasn't just some scholarship kid. This was a weapon. Upstairs in her office with windows that touched the sky, Evelyn Drake watched the same scene unfold on a silent feed. "Do you know he accessed the system last night?" her assistant asked. Worried. Evelyn didn't answer at first. Her eyes were locked on the boy. The confidence, the clarity, that eerie calm. "He didn't just access it," she said. "He dissected it." A pause. "He's not here to learn," she added. "He's here to remember." Her assistant shifted uncomfortably. "Should we be concerned?" Evelyn's voice turned colder. "No, but some people should be ashamed." She tapped her tablet and pulled up Leo's background again. This time she didn't just skim. No disciplinary history. Top grades. Community-built coding platform for underfunded schools. Declined full rides to 3 major universities. Chose Halcyon. Why, because of Jonah, she realized. She leaned back in her chair, lips pressed tight. There was a line from Leo's interview transcript with the scholarship committee. She'd ignored it before. Now it punched through her like cold water. Sometimes you apply to the place that forgot your family just to remind them what they lost. Evelyn closed the file. Her own voice echoed in her mind, 12 years younger, sharper, colder. "You're letting your feelings cloud your judgment, Jonah. Business doesn't run on fear." His eyes back then had been calm. Not angry, just disappointed. And maybe that's why you'll never see the fault lines until they're breaking. She rubbed her temple. A headache was building. Some ghosts didn't knock. They just walked in, put their feet up, and started rearranging the furniture. Later that day, Leo found an envelope waiting for him in his dorm mailbox. No return address, just the Halcyon seal embossed in silver. Inside was a folded note, Conference Room 6B. 9 p.m. Come alone. No signature. No title. Just a single initial. He stared at it for a moment, then tucked it into his pocket and walked outside. Jonah was waiting by the fountain near the south exit, sitting on the edge with a brown bag of sandwiches and a tired smile. "You already know," Leo asked, dropping next to him. "About the sandbox," Jonah chuckled. "I knew when the lag disappeared off the dev monitor at 3 a.m. You mad?" Leo took a bite of his sandwich. "I think she knows." Jonah didn't respond. "She's watching me." Leo continued. "Every move, every keystroke. She's not angry yet, but she's unsettled. I can feel it." Jonah stared at the water. "Unsettled means she's thinking. That's more than we had 12 years ago." Leo nodded. "She wants to meet tonight." Jonah turned. You going? Yes. A long silence passed between them. Finally, Jonah said quietly, If she asks why you're really here, what will you tell her? Leo looked at his father, then at the rising tower of Halcyon behind them, glowing in gold and arrogance. I'll tell her, he said, voice steady, that I didn't come to burn anything down. I came to show her what's still standing. Jonah smiled. It was small, but it was proud. Then, don't flinch, I won't, Leo said, and he didn't. That night at 9 p.m., sharp Leo stood in front of conference room 6B. He knocked once, and walked into history. The hum of the overhead lights in conference room 6B was so low it almost sounded like breathing. Evelyn Drake sat alone at the far end of the long glass table, one hand wrapped around a mug of untouched tea. No assistant, no security, no PR staff, just her and the chair across from her empty for now. At precisely 9:00 p.m., the door opened. Leo Mercer stepped inside, composed but unpretentious. He wore a dark hoodie, the sleeves pushed to his forearms, and carried no laptop, no phone. His eyes flicked across the room once, clocking the exits, the silence, the absence of surveillance. Then he sat. Neither spoke for a moment. The air between them was heavy, not with hostility, but with the weight of something unspoken for too long. Finally, Evelyn broke the silence. You look like him. Leo offered a half-smile. That's usually not a compliment in this building. Evelyn didn't smile back. You knew who I was when you applied. Yes. And you came anyway. Leo's voice was quiet but steady. Because you didn't just shut the door on my father, you shut it on what he believed in. I wanted to see if the door was still locked, or if you'd forgotten you ever closed it. Evelyn leaned forward, hands clasped. Tell me honestly, are you here to prove a point? Leo shrugged. I'm here because truth doesn't erase itself. Someone has to bring it back into the light. A pause. And because he added, my father still thinks this place can be redeemed. That, maybe, people can too. Something shifted in Evelyn's eyes. Just slightly. She studied the boy across from her, not a boy really, but not yet a man shaped by compromise either. He had Jonah's mind, but the voice. That was new. That voice carried steel wrapped in grace. I read your file, she said. Everything. The essays, the evaluations. But the only line that felt honest was this. She pulled out a printout and read, The truth isn't dangerous. It's just inconvenient. You wrote that when you were 15. Leo nodded. And it's aged better than most things I've said since. That finally earned a flicker of amusement from her. But it didn't last. Evelyn reached into her briefcase and pulled out a thin black folder. She slid it across the table. Do you know what that is? Leo opened it. A copy of the whistleblower report. Jonah Mercer's name typed neatly at the top. Pages detailing the data corruption risks in the Halcyon MedCore system buried for 12 years. No annotations, no acknowledgement, just cold clinical truth. I was 27 when this crossed my desk, Evelyn said softly. You think I was heartless, don't you? Leo didn't respond. She continued. I thought. Following the chain of command meant I wasn't responsible. That if I didn't look too closely, I wouldn't see the cracks. But cracks don't disappear when you look away. They grow. She tapped the folder. Your father saw them, and he screamed into a vacuum. We made sure no one ever heard him. Leo's jaw clenched. He never hated you, he said. You should know that. Not once. Even when Mom got sick. Even when no one would hire him. He never let me blame you. Evelyn looked stunned. Why? Because Leo said, voice tight, he said, bitterness is easy, accountability is harder. There, it was a silence so thick it swallowed the air. Evelyn closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them and asked carefully, What do you want from me, Leo? He looked her dead in the eye. I want you to remember who my father was. Not the liability, not the problem, the architect, the one who saw the cracks before anyone else did. Evelyn exhaled. And if I do, then you stop building glass towers on broken foundations. She stared at him for a long time. Then quietly, You're not here for revenge. No, Leo said, but I'm not here for redemption either. That's yours to find. A pause. Then he stood. I didn't come to burn anything down, he added. I came to light up the places you've kept in the dark. And with that, he walked out. Later that night, Jonah sat at the kitchen table soldering wires for an old Raspberry Pi. The apartment was silent except for the hiss of the iron. The door opened. Leo stepped in, dropped his bag, and didn't say anything for a long while. Jonah didn't look up. How'd it go? She gave me the report, Leo said. Sitting. The one they buried. Jonah paused. She still had it? Leo nodded. In perfect condition. 12 years later. Jonah's hands stilled over the board. She asked why you never hated her. Jonah chuckled softly. And what did you say I told her the truth? That you chose the harder thing. Jonah set the soldering iron down and looked at his son. Bitterness eats from the inside out, he said. I watched it take good men and leave hollow ones behind. I had to choose hate her, or raise you. Leo's eyes burned, but he didn't look away. You did both. Jonah shook his head. I only did one right. A pause. She asked what I wanted. Leo said, I told her to stop building glass towers on broken foundations. Jonah smiled faintly. Good line. Leo shrugged. Might have borrowed it from you. You make it sound better. Then silence again. But this time it wasn't heavy. It was full with something new. Possibility. Healing. The beginning of something they hadn't dared hope for. Elsewhere in the city, Evelyn stood alone in her high-rise office. The lights were off. The city outside pulsed with life. She stared down at the report Leo had returned to her. And then, carefully, she did something she hadn't done in over a decade. She picked up her phone and dialed the director of community partnerships. This is Evelyn Drake, she said. I need to schedule a site visit. A site visit to where Mamshi looked down at the black folder in her hands, to wherever Jonah Mercer disappeared to after we erased him. The West Side Community Tech Hub didn't look like much from the outside. A cracked sign, a peeling mural of children holding tablets. Rust crept along the window frames, and a handwritten poster near the entrance read, Free coding classes, all ages welcome. But when Evelyn Drake stepped inside, the air shifted. It was warm, not in temperature and feeling. There was something about the smell of old plastic and worn carpet, the faint sound of typing, and the laughter of a dozen children trying to outcode each other that made the room feel more alive than her entire corporate tower. She paused just inside the threshold. No one noticed her. Not yet. She spotted him at the back of the main room, Jonah Mercer kneeling beside a boy who couldn't have been more than 10, guiding his fingers across a trackpad with patience that made time irrelevant. I told you. Donnie Jonah said gently, the semicolon is the difference between working code and a blank screen. The boy frowned, tried again, and grinned when the terminal responded with a blinking cursor and the words, Hello World. Jonah smiled and ruffled his hair. See, you made the machine speak. Evelyn watched from a distance and remembered. 12 years ago, that same voice had tried to warn her about a line of code that didn't blink when it failed one that could have cost real lives. She hadn't listened then, but today she wasn't here to correct the past. She was here to understand the present he had chosen. A woman in her 60s approached Evelyn with a clipboard and a warm, if surprised, smile. You're from Halcyon, she asked. Evelyn nodded. Evelyn Drake, CEO. The woman's eyes widened. Well, you're the first one to ever walk through our door. Are you, Diane, 30 years in community work? Diane said, shaking her hand. Never expected a corporate queen in heels to show up on a Tuesday. I left the heels in the car, Evelyn replied dryly. That earned a chuckle. Jonah didn't mention you were coming. He doesn't know. Diane tilted her head. Are you here to hire him back? No, Evelyn said softly. I'm here to find out why he never came back. They walked slowly through the center. Each room held something unexpected. A corner where teenagers were building websites for local businesses. A shelf of donated laptops labeled by Function Coding Ready Gaming Capable Needs Charging. A group of elderly women learning how to set up video calls with their grandchildren. Everywhere Evelyn looked, there was quiet resilience wrapped in second-hand plastic. Jonah did this, she asked. All of it. Diane nodded. The funding, the teaching, the outreach. He builds things most of us wouldn't even know how to ask for. A mother in a faded jacket frowned at Evelyn. Halcyon only shows up when they need PR right. Jonah's voice was calm, but firm. They're here because we made it impossible for them to stay away. And he does it for free. Diane smiled. He does it because someone once took everything from him. And he decided that wouldn't be the end of his story. Evelyn swallowed hard. They passed a small office where a girl about 12 stood at a whiteboard mimicking a diagram Jonah must have taught her. This is a logic gate, she explained to two younger kids. It asks if this is true, and that is true. Then what happens next? Evelyn stopped in her tracks, because that question, what happens next, had haunted her for over a decade. And now she was seeing the answer. Not in shareholder reports, not in product launches, but here, in second-hand code and second chances. Later, when the children had left and the lights dimmed, Jonah stood alone, wiping down tables with a rag that had seen better days. He didn't notice her until she was only a few feet away. He turned, startled. Evelyn. She held up a hand. Don't worry, I'm not here to make a scene. He hesitated. Then why are you here to see what you built? Jonah folded the rag slowly, deliberately. You already knew I didn't disappear, he said. You just never cared to look. She nodded, accepting the truth of that. I came because I found the report, she said, and I realized I never read it like a person. I read it like a risk assessment. Jonah leaned against the table. And what did it say this time? That you were right. He didn't respond. I didn't come to apologize, she said quietly. I came to ask a question. Jonah waited. She stepped closer, searching his eyes. How did you not become bitter? He exhaled slowly, then answered with a voice low and even. Because bitterness doesn't build anything. And I still had Leo. There it was, the line that cracked something in her. She sat down, across from him. No titles, no glass between them. You know, she said I thought power meant keeping control, but watching you teach a 10-year-old how to talk to a machine, that felt more powerful than any boardroom I've ever sat in. Jonah studied her. Then maybe it's time you sit in a different room. Evelyn met his gaze. With you. Not behind me, he said. Not above me. With me. A long silence stretched between them. Finally, she asked, almost afraid of the answer, Would you come back? He shook his head gently. I've already arrived. You're the one who left the work behind. She looked down, a quiet humility blooming in her expression. What if, she said slowly, Halcyon didn't just hire you back? What if we partnered with this place, with this community? What if we stopped pretending innovation was something that only happened in towers? Jonah leaned back. You'd never convince your board. I don't need to convince them, she said. I just need to start something so undeniable they're forced to follow. He considered that. Then smiled, the first genuine smile she'd seen from him in 12 years. I built this place, he said, because I couldn't fix what was broken back there. She nodded. Then maybe now, we fix it together. Jonah extended a hand. Not to shake, but to begin. She took it. Not to forgive, but to build. together. The clatter of mismatched keyboards and the hum of second-hand desktops echoed faintly through the West Side Center. It was late afternoon, and the golden light streaming through the tall windows made the peeling paint on the walls glow with a kind of worn dignity. Evelyn Drake stood in the corner unnoticed for once, just another adult with a clipboard pretending she wasn't holding her breath. Jonah moved across the room with quiet authority, explaining the difference between for loops and while loops to a group of teenagers too curious to pretend otherwise. He didn't talk down to them. He didn't dazzle them. He taught them like someone who knew what it meant to need every scrap of knowledge just to survive. From the back of the room, Leo watched his father the way one might watch a bridge being built mid-air. Evelyn had been standing there for 40 minutes. No one had offered her coffee. No one asked for her autograph. No one recognized her as the CEO of Halcyon Tech. For the first time in years, she felt exactly where she needed to be. Evelyn stood in the corner, her title fading, replaced by a longing to be part of something that didn't demand perfection. When the session ended, Jonah turned. Their eyes met. "You planning to audit every class?" he asked, wiping his hands with a rag. "No," she said. "Just this one." He raised a brow but didn't push. Outside, beneath the awning that still bore a faded sign for summer camp registration, Evelyn reached into her bag and pulled out a small object wrapped in a cloth. She handed it to Jonah. He unwrapped it slowly. An old external hard drive. His breath caught. "Is this the build from the basement lab?" she said. "The one you patched during the blackout? It still runs most of our back-end server load." He chuckled. "I built that while eating stale Cheetos and duct-taping a flashlight to my forehead." "I remember," she said softly. "You said real systems run on desperation and bad coffee." He ran his thumb over the casing, then looked up. "So what's this A piece offering?" "No contracts," she said. "No PR. Just a chance. A chance for what he asked. To build something together. That doesn't erase people like you." Jonah was quiet. His fingers tightened around the drive. "And you want what in return?" "Your terms," she said. "Not mine." He gave a low whistle. "That's either very smart or very desperate." "Maybe both," she said. "Maybe it's time I stopped pretending Halcyon's legacy is a stock price." He studied her for a long beat, then nodded toward the center. "Come back tomorrow. Sit in for a full day. Then we'll talk." She smiled. "I'll bring my own chair," she said. The next day, Evelyn did just that. No bodyguard, no driver, just her in jeans and a loose sweater sleeves rolled up watching Jonah explain binary trees to a group of wide-eyed students. At lunch, she helped sort sandwiches. Leo made sure she took the one with the sticker that read, "Mystery meat, do not trust." They laughed briefly like people who had once been something other than adversaries. That afternoon, Jonah handed her the notepad, his handwriting steady, each line a quiet rebellion against a system that erased him. She opened it. No Halcyon logos on the walls. 5 years of funding non-negotiable. Internships for every student who completes the full course. No advisory role, full decision-making power shared. No photos unless the kids agree. At the bottom, we don't need saviors, we need stakeholders. Evelyn read it twice, then met his eyes. "I agree. You're not going to ask legal to rewrite it?" Jonah asked. "I didn't bring legal." He raised a brow. "You brought a hard drive instead of a contract. That's new." She shrugged. "I'm trying to start new things." Just then, a young girl sprinted across the room and nearly crashed into them. She was holding a crumpled piece of paper covered in wild, abstract lines that looked like chaos to most, but Evelyn's eyes widened. "That's a network," she said. The girl beamed. "It's how I imagine the world. But like made of people." "What's your name?" Jonah asked. "Mia," she said brightly. "My mom says I see things that aren't really there. But I think I just see the parts people forget." Evelyn froze. Mia, Jonah asked, glancing back and forth. Evelyn gave a small, helpless smile. "My daughter." Jonah looked again, and suddenly it was there, the same sharp gaze Evelyn once had, now softened by childhood and color pencils. She drew the system Leo said from behind them, before she knew what it was called. Leo glanced at his father. "She's starting to see what you always did, Dad." Evelyn swallowed. "She draws, everything she feels, doesn't get noticed." Jonah nodded. "She gets that from you." Evelyn drove through the dusk, the hard drive heavy in her bag, Mia's drawing heavier in her mind. That evening, Evelyn sat on the Mercer family's worn couch for the first time. Leo worked on his laptop quietly while Jonah fixed a broken lamp. "You still fix things by hand?" she asked. He didn't look up. Some things deserved the time. The lamp flickered back to life. She smiled. "That's how legacy works, too." He turned. "Legacy doesn't mean much if no one remembers the people it erased." She nodded. "Then let's build one that doesn't require erasure." There was a pause. Then Evelyn stood. "I should go." Jonah walked her to the door. She hesitated, then pointed at the fridge where a crude drawing of code in crayon hung by a magnet. "That's Leo's first algorithm," Jonah said, chuckling. "He drew it after watching me fix a bug with duct tape and prayer." Evelyn stared. Mia's early sketches looked just like it. Sometimes she whispered, "Patterns are inherited." Jonah met her eyes. "And sometimes they're chosen." She stepped outside, the evening air heavy with possibility. "Jonah," she said, pausing. He waited. "This time, I'm not asking you to come back. I'm asking if you'll let us meet you where you've always been." He didn't smile, but he didn't close the door either. And that finally was enough. The file sat untouched for over a decade. Folder Internal Risk Memo, 2013. Subfolder Mercer Termination. Evelyn Drake stared at it on her tablet, the screen casting a dull light across her quiet office. Everything around her gleamed with Success Glass Chrome Awards etched with her name. But the file glowed with something else. A reckoning. She took a breath, tapped it open. It began with standard legalese. Breach of confidentiality. Violation of NDA. Immediate dismissal. All language she once believed protected the company. But halfway through, her eyes stopped on one sentence. Engineer J. Mercer flagged a security breach in MedCore Beta 2.1. Risk to patient data plausible. Immediate containment advised. Flagged, not caused. Below it, in scanned ink, unmistakable and cruel in its clarity, was a note. Ignore. Deal with it after close. Don't escalate. GD Graham Davis, her ex-husband, former COO. The man who had once told her in bed, "Don't let emotion dilute your strategy." Evelyn sat back. That same night she had curled beside him and whispered, "Jonah's worried." And Graham had replied without hesitation, "Jonah is replaceable. The contract isn't." The file revealed Graham had buried the report to secure a $50 million contract with a healthcare conglomerate, one that hinged on MedCore's flawless launch. Evelyn remembered a late night in their old office, Graham's hand on her shoulder, his voice smooth. "Jonah's a dreamer, not a builder. He'll sink us with his paranoia." She had nodded, trusting his certainty over her own doubts. She hadn't questioned it. Until now. She tapped again, and a time-stamped audio file played. Jonah's voice, younger, calm, but firm. "If we don't fix this vulnerability before launch, it's only a matter of time before someone exploits it. I can't sign off on it." A pause. Then Graham's voice, smooth, "Practiced, Jonah. We appreciate your diligence. But this is above your pay grade now. We need you to stay in your lane." Evelyn's fingers trembled slightly. She had believed the wrong man. Later that evening, Evelyn walked slowly down the hallway of her own home. Not the penthouse in Halcyon Tower, but the smaller house she'd retreated to after the divorce. The one with cracks in the plaster and fewer mirrors. She stopped outside a door she hadn't opened in years. Mia's art room. Her daughter wasn't home tonight. sleepover coding club some chaos of tweenhood. The silence was thick with things unspoken. She pushed the door gently. Inside the walls were plastered with drawings. Not flowers, not cartoons, systems, networks, loops of people holding hands drawn in rainbow ink labeled with titles like "The Ones They Forgot," "The Ones We Should Have Noticed." And in the center, a newer sketch. A man holding a toolbox in one hand and a keyboard in the other, standing between a cracked building and a blooming tree. A little girl stood beside him holding his hand. At the bottom of the page, Mia had scribbled, "People can fix more than machines." Evelyn sat on the floor, knees pulled close. Her daughter had seen what she hadn't, not in code, but in character. She took out her phone and scrolled past meetings, mergers, interviews until she found it. The last photo she had taken of Jonah 12 years ago, back when he still wore a badge with his name on it, not just a flashlight and toolbox. She studied his face, not for anger, but for belief. The belief she had buried under strategy decks and risk assessments. The next morning, she stood in front of the mirror in her bedroom, pinning up her hair. But this time, instead of her sleek navy suit, she wore a simple cardigan and flats. She looked less like the CEO of Halcyon and more like Mia's mom. Before leaving, she pulled out a dusty box from the closet. Inside, among archived prototypes and abandoned gadgets, was a hard drive. Labeled in black Sharpie V1, Mercer Core Engine. She held it as if it might break. Or maybe she might. That night, she drove without her driver, without her calendar assistant, to the address Leo had once listed on the scholarship application. She parked across the street and waited. At 8:13 p.m., the porch light flicked on. Jonah opened the door, a towel slung over his shoulder as if he'd just finished dishes. He froze when he saw her. No suit, no assistant, just Evelyn. She stepped forward, hands open. "I didn't come with a proposal. I came with this." She held out the hard drive. Jonah didn't take it. "I don't need a relic," he said, guarded. "It's not a relic," she replied. "It's proof. You wrote the engine we still use. 60% of Halcyon's current infrastructure is built on your architecture. We kept using your name in the lines of code, just erased it from the conference slides." He exhaled slow. "That sounds like you finally opened the file." "I opened more than that," she said. "I opened the door I never let myself walk through. The one that led to you." A long silence. Then almost a whisper. "Why now?" Evelyn's voice didn't tremble. It was clear, bare, because it took me 12 years to learn that success built on silence is still failure. Jonah looked down at the drive, then back at her. "And what do you want from me now?" She shook her head. "I don't want anything from you. I want something with you." He stepped aside. "Come in." Inside, the place was small but warm, lived in. Leo's sketches lined the refrigerator. A plant sat in the window, barely alive, but trying. Evelyn sat at the table. Jonah poured 2 mugs of tea. No wine, no posturing, just honesty. She took a sip, then met his eyes. "I can't undo what happened. And I know sorry won't make it right, but I can choose now to build different. And not without you this time." Jonah studied her for a long time. "You want me to forgive you?" "No," she said softly. "I want you to believe that I see you now." He set down his mug. "My son asked me if I'd forgive you," Jonah said. "What did you say? I told him forgiveness isn't the point, but trust. That's something I might be ready to try again." Their eyes met, not as enemies, not even as old colleagues, but as 2 people who had once been idealists and maybe still were. Outside, the streetlight flickered on, and for the first time, Evelyn Drake didn't flinch from the dark. The Halcyon Outreach Center smelled like warm plastic and burnt coffee, a scent Jonah had come to associate with second chances. It was Saturday morning. Rain tapped lightly against the high windows and the center buzzed with quiet energy. Kids in donated hoodies clustered around old monitors, heads bent fingers dancing across keyboards like they were born to it. Jonah moved among them, calm and deliberate, checking a loose cable here, pointing out a syntax error there. At the far end of the room, Leo knelt beside a girl who couldn't have been older than 11. She wore a lavender jacket 3 sizes too big and was clutching a crumpled paper covered in drawings. "You want to show me what that is?" Leo asked. The girl hesitated, then slowly unfolded the paper. It was a hand-drawn logo of Halcyon, but instead of the sleek, icy blue triangle that crowned every company badge, hers was heart-shaped. Inside the heart were tangled wires forming tiny figures, people holding hands, eyes closed, connected by fragile threads. Leo stared at it. The girl looked down shyly. "It's called the Power Grid for Forgotten People." Leo smiled. "That's a better name than half the departments at Halcyon." The girl looked up, curious. "Do you work there?" He hesitated. "Kinda." She tilted her head. "Is it true rich people don't like to share power?" Leo blinked. "Who told you that?" "My mom," she said. "She said people at the top forget what it's like at the bottom." Leo thought for a moment, then said softly, "Yeah, some do." She asked, "So why are you here?" Leo glanced at the drawing again. Then he said something he hadn't said aloud before, "Because my dad didn't let me believe I was invisible." The girl's eyes lit up. Just then, Jonah called from across the room. "Leo, can you run the boot script for Station 5? Leo gave the girl a thumbs up. "Keep drawing. You're designing a future we haven't built yet." As he jogged off, Evelyn stood quietly near the doorway, having witnessed the exchange. Next to her, a young woman from Halcyon's HR team leaned in and whispered, "That little girl, her name's Mia. Evelyn's daughter." Jonah noticed her too late. He froze for half a second, then nodded a quiet greeting. Evelyn stepped forward. "She insisted on coming," she said, voice light. "Said she wanted to see what I've been ignoring." Jonah looked at her, then at Mia. "She sees more than most people twice her age," he murmured. "She always has," Evelyn replied. "But lately, she's been drawing these diagrams. Systems made of people. Like she's trying to code a world where no one falls through." Jonah glanced at the drawing Mia had given Leo. "Maybe she's already done it." They stood side by side for a moment, watching as Mia joined Leo at another station. She giggled at something he said, then showed him another picture, a cluster of stars connected by threads labeled Trust, Grace, and Time. "I don't know what to call what's happening here," Evelyn said softly, "but it feels like repair." Jonah didn't answer immediately. Then he said, "You don't repair what's broken with noise. You do it in silence, slowly, by showing up again, and again, and again." Evelyn turned toward him. "And what if the person you're trying to repair with doesn't trust you yet?" Jonah met her gaze. "Then you keep building the bridge plank by plank until one day they choose to walk across." She looked at him for a long time. "And if they don't, then at least you're not on the shore alone anymore." An hour later, as the workshop wound down, a senior Halcyon engineer, Fletcher, stepped inside. Clean-shaven, crisp suit clipboard in hand. He scanned the room, eyes narrowing at the setup. He spotted Jonah leading a debugging session and walked straight over. "You're running unapproved software on Halcyon-donated equipment," Fletcher said flatly. Jonah didn't look up. "It's an open-source patch. Safer than your factory loadout." Fletcher's jaw twitched. "That's not protocol." "Neither was leaving a kid's first AI module full of memory leaks," Jonah said calmly. Fletcher looked around, saw the kids watching. He lowered his voice. "You don't get to rewrite rules just because you got an apology." At that moment, Evelyn stepped between them. "I asked him to help us rebuild trust," she said. "And that starts with changing the rules that never protected the right people in the first place." Fletcher scoffed. "With respect, Ms. Drake, this is not a strategy. This is a charity case. Evelyn's voice hardened but never rose. No, this is infrastructure. You're just not used to seeing it built with empathy instead of ego. Fletcher opened his mouth, but Evelyn cut him off. You can report me to the board if you'd like. Just make sure your memo includes the part where a 12-year-old fixed what your senior engineers couldn't. He left. Jonah looked at her impressed. You didn't have to do that. I did, she said. That wasn't for you. That was for Mia. He arched an eyebrow. Evelyn explained, She once asked me if I thought our company made the world better. I couldn't answer her. Now I can. They watched as Mia helped another little boy drag code blocks across the screen. Jonah said, You sure she's not the one running Halcyon now? Evelyn smiled. She might be. She's the first CEO in this family who leads with heart. Jonah chuckled, then added, She's also the first one I'd follow without hesitation. The lights in the center flickered once a circuit reset, then steadied. No one noticed except Jonah. But he smiled. It meant the system was stabilizing. And maybe. So were they. The Halcyon boardroom was a cathedral of glass and steel cold, echoing, intimidating. The kind of room built to make people feel small unless they were holding the checkbook. Jonah had never been inside it before. Now he sat at the far end of the long obsidian table beside Leo, whose eyes scanned every inch of the room with quiet calculation. Across from them, a dozen board members shuffled papers, whispered behind tablets, avoided eye contact. At the head of the table stood Evelyn Drake, spine-straight expression unreadable. To her left, Carter Langford cleared his throat. He was Halcyon's largest private shareholder, all polished charm and coiled ambition. The financials of this outreach program are concerning, he began. We're pouring resources into communities that can't generate returns. This isn't how a technology firm leads in the fourth industrial revolution. Evelyn didn't flinch. This isn't about industry trends, Carter, she said. It's about legacy. Carter leaned forward. Legacy doesn't pay dividends. From the back of the room, a woman whispered, Is that the janitor? Jonah heard it. Leo heard it. Neither reacted. Carter continued, We are not a non-profit. We are not a social experiment. We're here to produce results. Evelyn folded her hands on the table. Calm. Then let's talk about results. She tapped a button on her tablet. The wall behind her lit up with graphs, but they weren't profit margins. They were heat maps of engagement, student testimonials, before and after metrics from the outreach centers. A bar graph showed an 87% improvement in problem-solving skills among program participants within 6 weeks. Jonah noticed Carter's jaw tighten. These are not numbers from a charity, Evelyn said. They're the foundation of a future talent pipeline, one built not just on brilliance but on resilience. Carter smirked. That's a nice story, but it won't sell at investor briefings. Then Evelyn's voice dropped low, clear, intentional. Maybe that's because investors are used to buying stories about power, but we're building one about purpose. A quiet murmur rippled across the table. Jonah caught her eye just for a second, and in that glance something unspoken passed between them. Carter leaned back unfazed. Fine, let's test this noble narrative. How many of the students in these programs are viable candidates for employment at Halcyon within the next year? Evelyn didn't answer. Instead, she looked toward Leo. He stood. The room quieted. My name is Leo Mercer, he began. I'm 17. I don't have a formal degree. I didn't go to a prep school. I've never worn a tie until today. Some board members chuckled uneasily. Leo continued. But 3 weeks ago, I patched an AI loop that your senior team couldn't fix in 48 hours. Carter's face darkened. Leo walked slowly toward the screen. This is a visualization I designed with Mia, one of our youngest students. He clicked again. A new graph bloomed an interconnected web of red, gold, and blue threads. It maps social capital, Leo explained. Not financial wealth, but networks of trust, mentorship, and access. He pointed to a cluster of red dots. This is where outreach students started. 0 access, no mentors, no inherited trust. Then he pointed to a gold node blinking at the center. This one is my dad, Jonah Mercer, the man your company erased from its history. Every head turned toward Jonah. Leo's voice didn't waver. He's not just a janitor. He's the architect of the system that still powers your infrastructure. And he taught me everything I know, not in a lab, not with funding, but under flickering light bulbs after graveyard shifts. Jonah's throat tightened. Leo looked straight at Carter. You want ROI, I'm it. Silence. Then Evelyn stepped forward. I brought them here not to prove a point, she said, but to remind this board what value really looks like. She turned slowly, surveying every face. We forgot that the best minds don't always wear badges. That innovation isn't born in quarterly reports, it's born in hunger, in humility, in those who know what it means to be overlooked. Carter stood his tone clipped. This is emotional theater. We are fiduciaries, not philosophers. Evelyn didn't blink. Then be a fiduciary who finally invests in something that outlives your signature. The room froze. And then from the far end, an older board member, a woman with silver hair and sharp eyes, spoke up. I lost my son to cancer 3 years ago, she said quietly. His favorite subject was code. He never had a mentor. No one ever gave him a keyboard. She looked at Jonah. Until today, I forgot what he might have become. She turned to Evelyn. I vote to approve expansion of outreach. 2 more centers by next quarter. Another member followed, then another. Carter stood rigid, isolated. Evelyn looked toward Jonah, then Leo. You don't build equity by waiting for permission, she said. You build it by inviting the invisible into the room. Jonah gave the slightest nod. Leo beside him whispered, Did we just win? Jonah smiled faintly. No, son. We just started. The scent of cinnamon and chamomile drifted through Evelyn's kitchen, soft, warm grounding. Jonah stood in the doorway, unsure whether to step in. I wasn't sure if you liked tea, Evelyn said, not looking up as she stirred a second cup. But chamomile seemed safe. I like quiet. Jonah replied, his voice low. That's usually enough. She turned and handed him the cup. Then this house will suit you just fine. It's been quiet for too long. They sat at the small round table near the window. Outside, the city buzzed in the distance, but here in this carefully kept lived-in corner of Evelyn Drake's world, it was all stillness. Leo and Mia were in the next room giggling over a sketchbook filled with something they called code painting. It was a mix of symbols and brushstrokes nonsensical to anyone else, but to them it made perfect sense. Jonah glanced toward the hallway. She's good for him, he murmured. Evelyn followed his gaze. He's good for her too. Mia doesn't let many people in. She's wary of polished shoes and rehearsed smiles. Jonah gave a half smile. Smart kid. They sipped their tea in silence for a moment. Then Evelyn asked, Is this strange for you? He nodded once. It is. Why did you come? Jonah set the cup down gently. Because my son didn't hesitate when she invited him. Evelyn's eyes softened. Children often do what adults forget how to trust before proof. Jonah met her eyes then. But adults carry memory, and mine still echoes in these rooms. Evelyn looked down, hands wrapped around her mug. I've lived in this house for 15 years, she said quietly, and I don't think I've been in it for more than 5. Jonah said nothing. She continued, I walked past that bookshelf every night without noticing it was crooked. I stepped over that loose floorboard until it stopped creaking. I made a home by ignoring the parts that didn't shine. He tilted his head. That's not a home. That's a showroom. Evelyn smiled, a sad, knowing curve. I think I was waiting for someone to say that. Jonah looked around at the carefully arranged photos, the perfectly pressed napkins, the gleaming marble countertops. I never needed someone to fix me, he said slowly. I needed someone to sit beside me while I figured out how to fix myself. Her voice dropped to almost a whisper. Maybe this time. I'm not here to save. Maybe I just want to stay. That landed between them like a note of music hanging in the air. In the next room, Leo and Mia laughed louder. Evelyn's lips twitched into a smile she hadn't worn in years. They made a game, she explained. It's called Hack the Cloud with Crayons. I don't understand it, but apparently it involves turning AI logic trees into superhero origin stories. Jonah chuckled. That sounds like Leo. Then, quieter, I never thought he'd find a space where he belonged. Not really. Evelyn looked at him. Do you feel like you belong now? He paused. I don't know. Maybe belonging isn't a place. Maybe it's just someone looking at you and not blinking. Her breath caught. Then look at me, Jonah. He did. And for the first time, he didn't see the CEO, or the heir to a billion-dollar empire, or the woman who once turned away when truth became inconvenient. He saw Evelyn. Just Evelyn. Worn. Brave. Learning. You don't owe me forgiveness, she said, voice raw, but I want to earn something close to it. Jonah stared at the tea swirling in his cup. I don't carry grudges, he said finally. They're too heavy for someone already carrying grief. Evelyn reached across the table, hesitated, then rested her fingers lightly on his. It wasn't romantic. Not yet. It was something quieter, deeper, a peace offering made of silence. Jonah didn't pull away. Instead, he whispered, I'm still learning how to need people. And I'm still learning how not to lead with control, Evelyn said. They stayed like that, unmoving, until Leo poked his head into the kitchen. Mia says we need adult testers for our app. Evelyn raised an eyebrow. Does it have a user manual? Mia appeared behind him, grinning. Nope, just trust. Jonah laughed. We're in trouble. As the four of them sat cross-legged on the floor that night testing code with crayons, laughing at absurd error messages and giving high fives for imagination, the house stopped being a showroom. It became a home. Not perfect, not polished, but present. And for Jonah Mercer, who'd spent years building futures for others in the dark, this at last felt like the beginning of one he could build in the light. The ribbon was red thick and tied tight across the entrance of the new Halcyon Outreach Center. But the hands that held the scissors weren't those of a CEO or a politician. They were small, calloused from pencils and keyboards, not from shaking donors' hands. Leo and Mia stood side by side beaming. Leo in a navy blazer that didn't quite hide his scuffed sneakers. Mia in a bright yellow hoodie covered in Sharpie sketches, gears, clouds, and hearts wrapped in circuits. Jonah stood in the front row watching them. He'd refused the front and center seat the board had reserved. He wanted this moment to belong to them, to the kids, to the overlooked, to the ones who had finally been seen. Beside him, Evelyn whispered, You sure you don't want to say something? He shook his head gently. I've said enough in silence. A soft hush fell over the crowd as the kids cut the ribbon together, giggling as it fluttered to the floor. Cheers erupted, cameras flashed. But inside the center, beneath the mural that read the Mercer Center for Ethical Innovation, the real work began. Children streamed into the classrooms clutching laptops, sketchbooks, even broken phones they hoped to rebuild. Mentors, former janitors, veterans, community college professors. A retired trucker who once taught himself Python on the road waited at every door. One of them walked past. Jonah gave a nod. They say you started this. Jonah smiled. I just left the light on. Inside the main classroom, Leo adjusted the projector while Mia scribbled, Welcome Hackers on the whiteboard in bubble letters. Evelyn, now seated near the back, watched them with something deeper than pride. It was awe. Leo turned to the students and cleared his throat. I'm not a teacher, he said, but I used to think I wasn't a student either. I thought the system wasn't built for people like me, people who started behind the starting line. He clicked to slide a photo of Jonah in his old maintenance uniform pushing a mop across the Halcyon basement. This was my first computer lab, my first classroom. That man right there, my dad taught me the rules of logic on the back of a receipt with a dying flashlight." The room went still. "He never taught me to chase power," Leo continued. "He taught me to honor the truth, to fix what's broken, and to never let someone else define your worth by the size of your paycheck or the shoes you wear." Mia stepped beside him. "We built this place not just to teach code, but to decode the world, to remind you that your story matters even if no one's heard it yet." Evelyn blinked away tears. Jonah did not. He let them fall. After the class, as the sun slipped lower through the wide glass panels, Jonah wandered toward the plaque near the front door. It was simple, understated, dedicated to those we overlooked, until they lit the way. Evelyn joined him, her heels silent against the tile. "They wanted to name it the Drake Mercer Center," she said. "I told them no. This was never about legacy. It's about presence." Jonah nodded. "Then you chose right." She looked at him. "Really looked? You could have walked away a dozen times," she said. "But you stayed, even when the room was dark." Jonah looked back at the glowing classroom where Leo and Mia were now drawing on the windows with dry erase markers, turning sunbeams into stories. "I stayed because light doesn't always come from above," he said. "Sometimes it starts underground, quiet, persistent, refusing to die." He turned to her. "I used to think healing meant going back to who we were before, but maybe it's becoming who we needed all along." Evelyn reached into her coat pocket, pulled out a small box. "No medals," she said, "but I thought this might matter." Inside was a circuit board, the same one Jonah had designed 12 years ago, the one buried in the core of Halcyon's AI. "I had them pull it from the archives," she said. "It still runs flawlessly, even after all this time." He held it gently like something sacred. "I don't know how to thank you," she whispered. Jonah smiled, then reached for her hand. "Then don't. Just walk with me." Before leaving the center, Jonah and Evelyn paused at a flickering bulb in the hallway. Together they tightened it, their hands brushing briefly. When the light steadied, Jonah said softly, "Sometimes one good fix is enough." Evelyn smiled, her eyes warm. "And sometimes it takes two." They didn't kiss. They didn't need to. Because sometimes the most powerful love story isn't about the moment hearts collide, but the quiet miracle when two people choose to rebuild side by side. As they stepped outside, the streetlights flickered on, one by one. Jonah looked up at them, then down at his son inside, surrounded by new minds, new hope, new light. "Do you ever wonder what legacy really means?" Evelyn asked. Jonah thought for a long moment. "Legacy isn't what we leave behind," he said. "It's the light we leave on, so others can find their way." And in that moment, with nothing left to prove and everything left to give, they stood hand in hand beneath the glow of the Mercer Center. No longer overlooked, just seen. And I'd love to hear from you. Where are you watching from, and which moment in Jonah and Evelyn's journey touched you the most? Was it the quiet resilience in the basement, the unspoken forgiveness, or the light they left behind? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Your words always mean the world. If this story moved, you inspired you, or simply made you pause and feel, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the bell so you never miss another powerful story like this. Every time you share or engage, you're helping stories like Jonah's reach the people who might need it most. Thank you so much for watching, from my heart to yours. Thank you for being here. Until next time, stay kind, stay hopeful, and never stop believing in second chances.